When I think of a luxury car brand, Bentley comes to mind, and today we're looking at the Flying Spur, or more specifically the Flying Spur S Hybrid, which has a V6 engine rather than the V8 or the V12. Now this might be of interest to those people who have got the ability of getting it as a company car, because you can really reduce that benefit in kind taxation. Now prices start from £201,000, and that is without adding any additional options. So in this review you can see if it's actually worth its price tag, and of course if the V6 Hybrid is the way to go. So to kick things off, I would like to talk about something that really defines a Bentley, at least in my opinion, and that is of course the driving comfort. Now, of course, you have got a serene in-cabin experience. There's very little wind noise that can be heard. There is very little rolling noise as well, be it at lower or higher speeds. And this is also due to the fact that you have got an acoustically treated windscreen and side windows. But what really stands out for me more than anything is the suspension system. It is an absolute work of art, and I think Bentley should be really proud of what they've actually been able to offer to their customers. I'd go as far as saying it's the best suspension system that I've ever come across on any vehicle that I've reviewed. Now it is of course adaptive, as you might expect for a vehicle of its price point, and here you have got a few different drive modes which will effectively determine how the suspension system operates. You have got sport mode, which will stiffen things up a little bit. You then have the Bentley mode, which will give you a little bit of a blend between sport and comfort mode, and then of course you do have the comfort mode, which I would suggest anyone owning this vehicle to drive pretty much permanently in comfort mode. Yes, you will get a bit more body roll when you're chucking around winding country routes, but are you realistically going to be doing that on a day-to-day basis? Probably not, but who am I to judge? Comfort mode here really soaks up all the anomalies, the speed bumps and the potholes, and means that you can simply glide over anything that the vehicle is faced with. Now there is also a custom mode which allows you to effectively customize the different aspects of the vehicle. So for example, the steering response and how the powertrain operates, and also of course how the suspension system is. This might be something of interest if you want, for example, a stiffer steering wheel, but you still want that comfortable driving experience with its suspension system. Now there is also a means of actually raising the entire suspension system if needs be, and this can be done via the infotainment system. Now all of this has been made possible thanks to the fact that you have got a 3-chamber air spring system with continuous dampening controls. Yes indeed, the vehicle will do it adaptively, and also given the fact that you can change it on the fly, you'll straight away feel the differences. Now in terms of the configuration, at the front you've got an aluminium double wishbone with a passive anti-roll bar, while at the rear it's an aluminium multi-link wishbone with a passive anti-roll bar. Next up we get on to performance, because here the Flying Spur Hybrid has a twin turbocharged 2.9 litre V6, which is a hybrid petrol engine, and that operates with a 100 kilowatt electric motor. Combined they output 400 kilowatts of power or 536 horsepower, giving you 750 Newton meters of torque. And yes indeed, it's less powerful than the V8 or indeed the V12. Now using launch control and Race Logic's Performance Box Touch, I clocked in a 0 to 20 mile an hour time of 1.23 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 1.91 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.72 seconds, which is a bit slower than the manufacturer's claim, but nonetheless still very rapid, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in 2.28 seconds. There is also a peak acceleration of 0.76 Gs. In terms of the overall top speed, this will get up to 177 miles an hour, while in pure EV mode it will get up to 87 miles an hour. Now its performance is very much exhilarating, be it if you're going to be driving out winding country roads, or of course if you can take it on track. I actually had the pleasure of driving the non-hybrid model around Goodwood Motor Circuit, and I had an absolute blast. Not only because I was able to notice how the vehicle is able to respond, be it in terms of the accelerator response and the brake pedal, but also how it was able to shift its weight from left and right. Better still, I was able to be a passenger as well and have this vehicle really ragged around the circuit by a professional driver. It left a massive smile on my face. Now I would also like to point out that the 8-speed dual clutch transmission is buttery smooth, and you won't be able to notice the gear changes yourself. Even if you have it on the manual mode, and that is done by initiating the gear lever downwards and then using the flappy paddles, you'll barely notice the differences. When I had a passenger in the vehicle and I was shifting between the gears, my passenger couldn't actually tell that I had shifted between the gears. It is that smooth and absolutely excellent, something that you'd come to expect from driving a Bentley. On that note, the Flying Spur gives you plenty of confidence when you're going around winding country routes, and this is because you've got an active all-wheel drive system, which prioritizes the rear wheels and kicks in the front wheels where needed, therefore giving you excellent traction, be it if you're on wetter tarmac or of course even if you're taking it on track. Now, I would just like to re-emphasize over here that you have got a curb weight of 2,505 kilograms. It is a chunky beast after all. You can feel the body roll and the weight shifted from left and right if you're going to be really chucking it around corners. But it's to be expected given the size and class of the vehicle. Where I would like to commend Bentley, however, is in terms of its braking performance. Here, as standard, you have got 10-piston front brakes with 410 by 38mm discs, while at the rear you've got a 4-piston system with 380 by 30mm discs. This gives you plenty of braking performance and confidence, be it, of course, if you're on track, or more suitably, if you're in an emergency situation and if you slam on the brakes, this vehicle will come to a standstill very quickly. So past its performance and handling characteristics, let's talk about efficiency. And unfortunately here, the Flying Spur Hybrid does fall short. Now this is in part due to the fact that the manufacturers only included an 18 kilowatt hour battery pack, or 14.1 kilowatt hour that's actually usable, therefore giving it roughly 25 miles of electric range. That's not only from my own test, but also the manufacturer's claims, so it's actually great to see that they are on point. Now there is a few different modes that you can select from via the infotainment system or by pressing a physical button on the center console. It's called E mode, and this will effectively cycle between EV drive, which will give you full EV driving, and you've also got hybrid, which I suspect most people will actually utilize, and you've also got hold mode, which will effectively do as the name suggests, hold the battery pack so that you can therefore use it at a later time. Now there is actually no means of fully self-charging the battery pack via the petrol engine, but I did notice that in sport mode that there was some extra range that was being accrued when I was driving. So therefore means that in sport mode you can theoretically charge up the battery pack and then therefore utilize it at a later time. But of course, if you really do want to have majority of the battery pack usable, you'll want to plug it in. Now, in terms of all of this, how does this actually affect fuel economy? Now, here I netted between 25 to 30 miles per gallon, which is not exactly the best sort of figures. It's almost expected in a massive limousine-esque vehicle like the Flying Spur Hybrid, but I was actually expecting better figures. That's not quite the case here, and the same could have been said about the Bentayga Hybrid, which was also pretty disappointing. In this respect, I just expected Bentley to either offer a larger battery pack and therefore potentially better the fuel economy, or just have a slightly better and more efficient powertrain. Nonetheless, it can be handy if those people are owning this vehicle and are only doing, let's say, 20 to 30 miles regularly, then in this respect you might want to just drive on EV mode, and therefore means that you can really maximize on efficiency and fuel economy. Now, in terms of the overall total driving range, there's an 80-litre fuel tank, and this will effectively give you roughly 435 miles. At least that is what I was able to notice when I looked at my instrument cluster. If you combine that with 25 miles of electric range, it gives you roughly 460 miles that you can drive on a single tank of petrol and a fully topped up battery pack. Now, I would also like to mention that the transition between the EV portion and the petrol portion is absolutely seamless. During this drive that we've just done over here, I've transitioned a multitude of times between the two modes, and it's really impressive to see how Bentley have really optimized the two modes to work in tandem. Therefore means you're not going to really be able to feel it, other than, of course, if you do a kickdown, you'll hear the engine really kick into life, and of course the exhaust system in the S model tuned to perfection, and therefore you can actually hear it roaring away from the front of the vehicle, and of course the exhaust system from the rear. Now, what you will notice, however, is regenerative braking, not only because you'll see it denoted via the instrument cluster, but also each time you lift off the accelerator pedal, the brake pedal itself will become depressed a little bit. Therefore, it does take a little bit of getting used to, specifically when it comes to finding the right sort of braking point. Now, when it comes to plugging in the Flying Spur Hybrid, you have got a Type 2 port. And due to the vehicle having a 7 kilowatt onboard charger, it means you can go from 0 to 100% in roughly 2.5 hours. It is a shame that the manufacturer has not provided an 11 or 22 kilowatt onboard charger, be it available as standard or indeed as an option. Now, if you're going to be plugging this at home via a 3-pin input, it will take you over 6 hours to attain the same amount of charge. Past how it is on the road, let's talk about its interior design. And here there are things I absolutely love but also dislike about the Flying Spur. First off, it's great to see that you've got a good degree of customization, although that shouldn't come as too much surprise given the overall price tag of the vehicle and the luxury segment. But for an additional option, you can customize the color, the stitching work, the upholstery, and even the finish that is found on the dashboard. Furthermore, it's great to see that you have got good customization with the steering wheel, and that the fact that you've got physical buttons and dials on it, which often go amiss on modern alternatives. Speaking of which, you've also got a plethora of them that are found via the center console, including dedicated climate control menu, which is very much appreciated in this modern era. Now, what I really dislike, however, is the fact that Bentley has opted for cheap feeling plastic that is found towards the stalks and also via the air vents. Of course, this might have some weight saving capabilities, but in all honesty, if you're looking at this and you're feeling and touching the vehicle, you might feel, why does this feel so cheap? Or why does it feel like it's come out of a vehicle that costs almost 10 or 100 times less the overall price tag? It just doesn't really suit the overall vehicle's class, and in my opinion, I would have just liked metal materials instead, like you'd find on the older generation Bentleys. But unfortunately, that is not the case, at least on the Flying Spur S Hybrid. Now, speaking of which, here, if you do want these 3 dials that are found towards the rotatable display, you have to splash out an additional £5,200 on an option. If you don't go for this, however, you will just have the infotainment system. Speaking of which, the 12.3-inch display is very vivid and responsive and gives you plenty of options, although I do think it's a little bit hard to navigate as the sub-menu system is a little bit convoluted. Furthermore, the back button, at least the virtual one, is very small and at the top, making it very hard to press if you're on the move, be it for yourself or of course the passenger. Now, there is also only support for Apple CarPlay over a wired connection. Yes, indeed, it's not supported wirelessly, and Android Auto is omitted altogether, which absolutely blows my mind. I think it's completely unacceptable given the overall price point of the Flying Spur. Now, as for the other elements of the cabin, you have got a fully digitalized instrument cluster, which will give you all the key information, and it's somewhat customizable. If you want a further extension to this, you've got a head-up display, although this is only comprised within the touring spec, which will set you back a whopping £6,940. This will project your traversing speed, the safety systems that are in operation, and therefore makes it a little bit more handy if you want to keep your eyes planted on the road. On that note, if you have got some money to spare, you might want to splurge out on the audio system. As standard, you have got a Bentley configuration that has 10 speakers and 650 watts of power output. If you go for the Bang & Olufsen upgrade, this will give you 1,500 watts of power output and 16 speakers, or if you splash out an additional £7,210, you have a 19-speaker, 2,200 watt system by Name Audio. This is something that is fitted on this press vehicle, and I can say the latter does certainly do well across the sound frequency range. If you want some more information about this, make sure you check out my detailed audio review that can be found up on your pop-up banner, or by following the links down in the description below or the pinned comments. Moving swiftly on, we get onto storage, which is a little bit limited. At the front, you have got the glove box. Then towards the center console, you have got an area for your smartphone, which doubles up as a wireless charger. You then have a 12-volt socket and 2 USB Type-A ports. There's also 2 small slits that are found on the either side of the center console, which can be handy, for example, for a set of keys. Then you've also got 2 cup holders that are found underneath a retractable area. But that's about it. Indeed, you have not even got an area that's found underneath the armrest, which by the way is movable, although it only locks in its minimum and maximum positions, which therefore means that if you've got a heavy hand and you want it in terms of its medium position, then you might find it a little bit annoying because it constantly slides back and forth. Now, the door bins are pretty large at the front and rear of the cabin, and they'll accommodate a 500ml bottle alongside some smaller size valuables. At the rear of the cabin, you have also got a pull-down armrest compartment, which reveals 2 USB Type-A ports and a 12-volt socket and a small little area. Furthermore, you've also got 2 cup holders, which can be found underneath the retractable tray. It is, however, a shame that in the V6 hybrid, you do not have the refrigerated bottle cooler that you'll find in the V8 model. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot. And here you've got only 351 litres to play around with no ability to drop down the seats. It's got a saloon-style opening, which means it's a little less practical in comparison to hatchbacks out there, although you won't probably find it in this sort of class. And then you've got an electric tailgate that can be operated via your key fob, the button found within the cabin, and also by pressing the Bentley logo. And then you've got small little side compartments where you'll also find a 12-volt socket. So where the Flying Spur makes up for the lack of storage is when it comes to the overall seating comfort. Now, the seats themselves are all very accommodating and soft, even in terms of the rear middle occupant if they were to be sat, and this is of course a standard on the Flying Spur, you'll find that it's actually not too uncomfortable. The headrest is actually retractable for the rear middle seat, meaning that if there's no one sat in the middle, it gives the driver a little extra visibility. It's also worth noting over here that for an additional option, you can go for a 4-seat configuration instead, rather than a 5-seater that is on this press vehicle. Now, in terms of headroom and legroom, I've got no problems whatsoever, both at the front or rear of the cabin. As someone who's just under 6 foot, I can almost fully stretch out my legs with the driving position as where I would have it. And also in terms of headroom, well, with even the optional sunroof over here, I've got no problems whatsoever. It's also great to see that at the back you have got 14-way electronic controls with a massage function. They're heated and also ventilated. Of course, not for the rear middle seat, but for the rear 2 outer seats. You've also got this really cushiony, soft headrest as well, which makes it, well, all that bit more comfortable. And given the fact that you can also recline the seats, it means that you can have a really nice, relaxing experience while you're being chauffeured around. Or, of course, if you are going to be a passenger over here and the owner is driving you around, well, you're going to really love to be sat at the rear. Now, other things to consider is the fact that you have got mirrors that pop down from the headliner, and this is only present for the rear outer occupants. The mirrors themselves are actually of better quality and larger than what you'd find at the front of the cabin, which just goes to show the target demographic that Bentley are aiming at. Now, here you have also got blinds which are retractable electronically for the rear windows and also the rear view window itself, therefore giving you extra privacy. Elsewhere, you've also got the ability of adding optional 10.1-inch rear displays. These are mounted at the rear portion of the front seats, therefore giving you some infotainment. Now, as standard, however, you will find that on the rear portion of the center console, there's a small little display. This is actually removable as well and therefore acts as a tablet. Very handy if you just want to be reclined back on your seat and you want to be adjusting the climate or, for example, the media, then you'll be able to do so at your leisure without having to reach over towards the rear portion of the center console. Now, as for the front of the cabin, you have got 24-way electronic controls, and very much like the rear seats, these are heated, ventilated, have got a massage function, and also have got a 2-memory function, which is something I forgot to mention for the rear seats, making it quite handy if you're going to be jumping in and out of the Flying Spur, and for example, you're going to be sharing it with your partner, or of course, with some other passengers that you have. Now, I would like to mention, however, that it's quite disappointing that a heated front windscreen does not come fitted as standard. Indeed, this is an option. And as for the mood lighting, it comes in at a whopping £2,080. I'm not really sure why it costs so much, but nonetheless, if you do want an accentuated light that goes and stretches all the way around the cabin, then you'll have to splurge out on this pretty spenny option. On the notion of customization, this perfectly brings me onto its exterior design. And yes, you guessed it, there's plenty of options to choose from its color, where you've got 7 that come in as standard or 60 which are optional, including the Alpine green satin, which is pictured, which in my opinion looks absolutely stunning. And then you have got the likes of different sized rims, where you've got 20 to 22 inch, where the 22 inch are actually pictured, which come in at a whopping £2,910, from even in terms of the model that you choose. The Flying Spur S, which is on review, has actually got a blacked out design. If that's not really up your street, then you can go for one of the other models instead. Personally, I do really like the Flying Spur S because it actually brings out some of the other details of the vehicle while looking a little bit more understated. With all that said, at the front of the vehicle, it looks really classy, thanks to the fact that you've got these really nice circular headlights and even the Flying B, which stands out. In fact, this has actually got an anti-theft upper section. So in other words, if you're going to be trying to pull it, it'll go straight into the bonnet, which I actually do think is a good sort of integration by Bentley, and like you'd find on some rival alternatives. As for the side, you've got this nice sort of sporty flare, which is thanks to the fact that you've got these body coloured wheel arches and those really large size alloys. And at the rear, you've got this really nice slender profile. The tail lights feed really well with the look of the vehicle, and you've got this very small little spoiler which just adds a little extra touch of sportiness. Ultimately over here, I think its exterior design looks really nice, but I'll be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below. Moving on, we get onto safety, and here I can't give you any sort of crash analysis because it's not being tested by Euro NCAP. However, I can talk about the driver assistance systems, which are actually pretty scarce. First off, you have got cruise control, which is rather basic. Then you have got lane assist, which can easily be enabled on and off by pressing a physical button on the left-hand stalk, which is very much appreciated. Then you have got traffic sign recognition, which is a little bit hit and miss because it will sometimes pick up some speed limits from the slip roads, for example, when you're on the motorway, and therefore give you incorrect information. But nonetheless, you should be aware of your surroundings. And then you've got exit warning and then blind spot warning. Now, if you go for the touring spec option, which will set you back £6,940, this will give you active lane assist, which I didn't think did that much of a great job adaptively, but nonetheless was appreciated in giving me slight steering support on the motorway. As for adaptive cruise control with traffic jam assist, I actually found this to be fantastic. It gave me great sort of confidence by keeping me at a safe distance from the leading vehicle and didn't feel jerky in the slightest. Then you've got Bentley Safeguard Plus and also a head-up display, which I mentioned before. You've also got night vision, and the latter I do think is really good. If you're going to be driving around winding country routes, specifically at night, you will find that night vision will pick out some sort of objects. For example, I noticed when a rabbit was crossing the road, it actually pointed it out via my instrument cluster, similarly when it was a deer or even a person, one of which actually I did not see, and it was great to see that the instrument cluster did actually point out to me, look out for your surroundings. So it's good to see that night vision actually does what it says on the tin. Now, in terms of parking and visibility, it's actually pretty impressive because despite the vehicle being 5.3 meters long and 2.2 meters wide, and when that is including the mirrors, it is actually surprisingly easy to park and maneuver. This is in part thanks to the fact that you've got an 11.46 meter turning circle. And by the way, on the hybrid model, you do not have all-wheel steering like you'd find on the non-hybrid variants of the Flying Spur. Elsewhere, the vehicle has actually got fantastic visibility, both at the front and side. And while the rear window is a little bit limited, specifically if you pop on the rear middle headrest, you have got fantastic high resolution cameras. They span around the vehicle and therefore give you visibility at the front, side and rear, preventing you, for example, from damaging your front or rear bumper or, of course, curbing your rims. You've also got front and rear parking sensors as well, giving you extra peace of mind. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict, and truthfully the Flying Spur isn't quite perfect. See, the overall interior trim could have been improved, the use of technology is a little bit lackluster, and the fact that you have to pay additional extras for a set of features that come as standard on much cheaper alternatives is quite disappointing. Nonetheless, you're still getting a very luxurious and comfortable vehicle that comes with that Bentley badge. Now, if you're considering the Flying Spur lineup and you're looking at the V6 hybrid, do of course look at it if you're going to be getting it as a company car, because you can really save yourself a lot of money on benefit in kind taxation. Furthermore, if you're going to be doing shorter journeys, say sub 50 miles, then you can really benefit on the overall fuel economy that the hybrid model brings, of course, if you can plug it in regularly. If you're no one that fits within any of these categories, and of course if you're a regular retail customer, then you might want to look at the V8 or the V12 instead. Now, I'd be curious to know what you make of the Flying Spur down in the comment section below. And of course, if you've enjoyed this independent detailed review, do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.